So hi, Mr. Veenod. Welcome
Hello.
to the Fast Mode.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving us this opportunity to speak to you.
You're welcome.
Of course, cable business and your international TV business has gotten a lot of limelight, and we've been covering a lot on your developments in the recent years. So there's a lot of buzz about 5G, about mobile networks and such.
Yes.
But here we are wanting to talk about the beginning point of it all, which is the fixed network where internet first started. And of course, there's a lot of say that with 5G they could rival fixed networks and all that. But we think that fixed network has its own stride, has its own plans. So let me start with this thing that your business strategy, okay, to stay in this telecom market. Let's begin with this term that we always see, bandwidth hogging services, touted as your best friend. Okay. Fixed operator's best friend. What's your take on this?
Oh, so to confess to you, I'm not sure that I've heard that as such. I think it's mostly, of course, in relations to fixed and mobile, right? That bandwidth, hogging applications and so on are detrimental if you're on a fixed mobile network and more expensive, and so therefore it must be beneficial for fixed. I don't think that most fixed carriers, including in the companies that I have been with in either the North America or Europe, have a strong opinion on that. We don't see it as such a differentiator with respect to mobile. At one point, so if you go back to the early days, in those days where there wasn't a strong wireless, say, alternative to broadband services, in general you were struggling with just the rapid growth of any kind of internet service. And in fact, the fixed net operators used to have problems where you were trying to throttle or otherwise try to charge people for the bandwidth consumption, and you got into trouble depending on the country with the regulators and the consumer for doing things like that. I think the general sentiment right now, whether it's fixed or mobile, is that the concept of unlimited usage is more prevalent, because this type of consumption is not so in my opinion, if you say you charge by minute, it's a very tangible human experience. You can translate that. Hey, we've been talking for 5 minutes. I know it's going to cost me more than 1 minute. It's a measured. Whereas bandwidth is not such. You can't say I've been on for an hour, and versus 2 hours. Well, if it's an hour of high bandwidth consumption, or it's not a directly user manageable experience. So that's the trend that you see, that it's just following in the general direction. Content is getting richer, right? With 4K, 8K is going to come soon. So I think for operators, we just have to enable this space, and you're not really going to be in the choice. You're either going to have to offer it or not.
So, given today's 4G speeds and all that, and people consuming a lot of heavy content like HD videos and all that, it is sort of changing people's appetite, getting them used to a lot of heavy content. So when they go back home, they would expect the same experience, and then they would expect it to be very cheap. So a lot of people actually delay consuming content until they get home, until they are on fixed networks. So from that point, that was where I guess this theme came about. When you have a lot, people say in the past it used to be just like very static websites that people are used to, and internet meant that. Today, internet means Netflix movies, things which are in high definition.
But I think you're right. But I think it's more than just a cost factor, right there. But there's also the service quality of service, because if you're mobile, you still have to contend with bandwidth limitations or coverage that might not have such a good experience if you are watching it on the go. Depends on where you are and so on, and it's not always that convenient. In general, I think we see wireless as very complementary. So far, that type of displacement has not happened. Right, and now the speculation is that 5G is starting to compete much more in the right, and I think in some areas that would be true, particularly where coverage is an issue. Or if you don't have a good in-home coverage or in-building coverage and so on. But typically, you know, even in places like this, for instance, you're not going to get that good a cell coverage if you go one level down. But the complement to the fixed is Wi-Fi, right? So this, you know, between fixed Wi-Fi and pure wireless, these three, I think, are not competing, but they're just equal parts.
Complementing each
other. Yeah. Okay. So I think the mobility aspect is quite important. So even for a lot of fixed operator now, most of our people are no longer plugging anything in. Right? There is a modem that's sitting somewhere in your home or in your building, but you're really consuming bandwidth through your Wi-Fi at the very minimum. Or, right, so the end user experience, I do believe, will ultimately be a wireless experience one way or another. And you know, we're either 5G or wireless, or this kind of technologies that's enabling the connection. And what you get with the wired network is a lot of, you know, consistency, speed, stability, you know, low latency, things like this. So you're just a step away from the last mile, as it were, the last meter. And I think these are very complementary services.
Okay. You know. So what do you think will happen like 5 to 10 years from now? Okay, let's not go too long, like 2 to 5 years. In terms of the network, that the consumption of content on networks, will it remain the way it is, or will there be certain shifts, like a bit more on Wi-Fi, a bit more on 5G, or do you think the ratio will remain as it is?
I think the move to wireless is an inevitable one.
And by wireless, do you mean 5G? Or
yes.
Combination of 5G and
Wi-Fi? I think it, you know, 5G, as 5G becomes more prevalent, I think, you know, I would say, I think a consumer is maybe going to be less aware of a lot of those things, whether you call it 3G, 4G, 5G, and so on. But in terms of the availability of content and the consumability of that content on Wi-Fi in economically viable ways, will that be a proposition? I think that will be more and more true. So I do think that is going to shift. I think, like I said earlier, the ways that people consume content, entertainment, and just general connectivity overall will be based off a device or based off systems that are largely wireless at the point of experience.
Okay, all right, okay. Right? I get it. You know, the last device, the last screen will be free of wires. It will be just mobile, completely mobile.
That I think
but whether it goes back to wireless and then to the fixed network of the building, that is not something that the customer will be.
And I think the economics of the rest of it will be challenging, and so therefore there's always a place for this to play, right? And 5G, we tout the you know, the high, but if you look at the specifications, it is very narrow. It, you know, a lot of things can disrupt that experience, right? A rain shower and so on. So many other, even wireless technologies will still be needed to ensure that there's good coverage. You need good backhaul capabilities. So a lot of the fixed services, especially for cable companies, telcos also, I mean, if that you are the great last mile, right? I mean, the next one level. So you just have to connect people when they're moving around a little bit. And the next. So I think this will grow, you know, in a healthy, you know, not competition, but supplementary services. It's similar to what we are seeing with respect to Netflix, for example. Right? Netflix in most parts of Europe and Western North America have not fundamentally displaced the traditional video services. You know, there are other factors that are affecting the consumption of traditional video, but not Netflix, right? Netflix is turning out to be almost a complementary service to traditional.
Okay. So in terms of bundling of content, that means the service, the digital service itself with your network, what's your take? Which kind of bundles see the highest traction in the market?
So, you know, I have to speak more from a sort of a European and some North American experience, right? Over there, most of we find that the most attractive bundles for us, where we have the least churn, the highest stability, is when we offer a combined packages, right? So voice, video, data, wireless. If we're able to offer them a all of those things together in a bundle that is simple to pay, simple to consume, we find that that's an attractive proposition. So obviously, voice is becoming a sort of an app, as it were.
Yes.
So it's just part of that enabled ecosystem. But content continues to be attractive.
Yes.
The margins are under much higher pressures in that business.
I see.
Connectivity is becoming the king, right?
Yes.
No matter what, the connectivity, whether it's wireless. So there's intense competition there. We are pushing the boundaries. I mean, for our fixed services in Europe, very soon we'll get to 1 gig, right? That's, and then you'll find that the pipe coming into your home is 1 gig, but then your Wi-Fi services, that I mentioned earlier, is not at that same pace.
Yes.
And that'll inevitably also keep up. So I think that's going to be the biggest ticket. People will start choosing that as almost a lifeline service. I gotta have it. And then on top of it, you have entertainment, which I think is, compelling entertainment will always be a proposition.
Yes. Have you seen scenarios or cases, a certain percentage of subscribers who came to you, became your customers because of the content that you are offering, not the other way around?
Yes, but I don't, I can't easily quote you statistics on it. There are some content like sporting content, for example, where people will come to you because of what you have.
I see.
This used to be true also for things like HBO, right, where the home of, Game of Thrones and many sort of very content that people find really compelling, and they have to take that particular service, and they need, and so they'll seek you out because you have it. And some of our markets in Europe, we are the exclusive owners of, providers of some of these kinds of content. So the people will come and sign up for your services in order to access that content. So it is a driver, but it's part of an overall ecosystem, and you need to try and attract all of them for your overall growth strategy.
So does this create like sort of a bargaining situation between content providers and connectivity providers, where a lot of connectivity providers are fighting for the same content, and therefore content providers now have a certain positioning?
Yeah, I think content providers do have, it depends a bit on the market, and these are places that are also depending again on the that is has some regulations around it. And in some countries they don't allow you to just have exclusive rights, and if you have it, you must offer it to somebody else at a so this is true in a lot of parts of Asia, Europe and North America. So you can't, particularly if a content owner is also a distributor, example of Comcast and so on. Right? You cannot say, I own NBC Universal, so NBC generated content can only be given to Comcast. They must also be, they must also offer that services within reasonable sort of commercial terms to their competitors and so on. So there is that. And where you find is in still places where, particularly where a regulator and so on don't consider that to be a kind of a fundamental right. Right? For example, sports and so on. Just because you have access to Premier League or something, they don't think that's going to disadvantage the population that you don't have it, right? And one carrier has it and the other don't, and it's like, hey, that's
Okay, great. I think we've covered mostly on the content and on your strategy side. I have one last area that I wanted to cover regarding your network technologies. What are we seeing in the horizon in terms of your fixed connectivity technologies? Any major changes you think we'll be seeing in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years?
Well, so I'm not the biggest expert there, but let me try to cover where I believe it's going and what I'm aware of. So in the cable-based broadband providers, we continue to bet heavily on the DOCSIS standards. Right? So I mentioned earlier about 1 gig and higher speeds. So the DOCSIS specifications 3.1 and later ones coming out. This is a very highly scalable platform. It's one of the advantages that the cable industry has over telecom and so on, where just over your coax network. You don't have to push fiber to get this kind of speed advantage. So we continue to be the speed advantage. We'll maintain that, and we continue to leverage the DOCSIS capabilities through the CMTS and so on. That CMTS technology itself is evolving in terms of going from everything being on a single chassis to distributing it. So this evolution, I think, will still continue to power over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And as we go, fiber will always be a close second. So from a fixed network strategy perspective, we feel very confident that we will be second to none. A telco who is a competitor has to go fiber in order to meet anything, which is a much higher cost proposition than, so we have a natural advantage over there. So I think DOCSIS for sure is still our future.
Yes.
Yeah.
And gives you the competitive edge in this market.
Yes, correct.
Okay. I think that's the kind of
Great.
the stuff that we wanted to know from you. And we thank for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing all the insights.
You're very welcome.
Yes,
Thank you for the
yes,
opportunity.
yes.
Thanks. Bye.